Ja Morant, one of his biggest moments to start his NBA career was when he had a blocked shot on Kyrie Irving. Why that moment now kind of ties into a big turning event that could be happening this offseason potentially with Ja Morant and his potential as a Nike athlete. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Grizzlies, and we're going to talk basketball coming up right here, right now on Locked On Grizzlies. You know what time it is. Let's lock in, baby.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your co-host, Damichael, beat writer here for the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee, joined by the one and only Joe Mullinax here. My co-host, Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm here with you, man. Did you do something with your hair? Did you trim up the beard, or you look more suave than usual, even?
Yeah, we had the you had the TNT game with the Pelicans, and then the game, I believe the game before that, or the exact game before that against the Timberwolves. There was the ESPN game, so I had to prepare for the possibility that I was put on TV. And
I apologize, I didn't notice sooner, partner. That's my fault. I should have picked up on that a little bit earlier.
It's just some self-awareness on my part. That's all it is. But thank you guys for tuning in with us as well here on Locked On Grizzlies. We appreciate you for tuning in, and today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. Remember, BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odd lines than ever before. Remember, BetOnline is where the game starts. The Grizzlies on the court, we've talked about it, a 9-6 start this season. Ja Morant playing, great basketball, following up his breakout season. Desmond Bane, having an even bigger breakout season than he did last season, and Jaren Jackson Jr. finally getting back into the fold. There's a lot of things that have happened around this team up to this point, but it's a big year off the court for the Grizzlies. So we've seen a lot of players get extensions, specifically Ja Morant, get a big contract extension. Saw Jaren Jackson Jr., a year ago get his extension. John Conchar got his extension this offseason. Tyus Jones got re-signed. And right now what you have is a roster of guys who a lot of these guys are committed for the next couple of seasons to this Grizzlies team. But off the court, the endorsements are growing. For one, Ja Morant in particular, Joe. And one of the biggest things around Ja Morant right now is his future in Nike, in terms of how big can he potentially be, in the Nike brand. You remember the Says Who commercial last year, right? Where Ja was a focal point, and it really, put attention on Memphis and the culture here. One of the biggest Nike commercials for Memphis that we have seen, before, almost some penny-like, type of impact there. So, it's a big year in that regards, but the biggest thing here is Ja Morant's potential as a signature shoe, athlete for Nike. There have been reports in the past. Someone told, the Commercial Appeal that it's going to happen. He had a source, close to Nike tell us that as well. So with all those things considered, Joe, I wrote a story that is out now. You can go check it out at commercialappeal.com about Ja Morant and his future, as a Nike athlete, and how it ties in to Kyrie Irving. If you think about the history of these two guys, it all goes back. One of Ja Morant's first biggest moments, Joe, was when he had the block shot against Kyrie Irving. And now I don't think it's a sort of a direct, thing where it's like, oh, Nike's transitioning from Kyrie to Ja Morant, as I touched on in the story, kind of deeper, but it's more of the fact that it's happening that way. And these two guys have been tied in throughout the course of their careers. And plus, we know what the Nike boost can do for a basketball player.
Absolutely. And first off, Damichael, in no way are you insinuating this, and I would highly recommend people go read the article because it's phenomenal, because it was written by Damichael. But we're not getting into the flame war stuff here in the comments. So don't get mad at me or Damichael and just chill. We're talking shoes here and we're talking culture. And when I talk culture, I'm talking the impact of this guy, Ja Morant, in terms of basketball culture. I work with young people every day as a teacher, as a coach, and I see more kids than ever before here in Virginia, where I live, not South Dakota. Here in Virginia, where I live, I see more kids 1,000 miles away rocking Ja Morant 12 jerseys than I've ever seen before. And they are buying in to what he is as a basketball player. But even bigger than that, he is starting the process. He's certainly not there yet. I wouldn't say he's Allen Iverson yet in that way, or he's on the same plane as LeBron or Kobe or somebody like that. But he's starting that journey in terms of being somebody that is synonymous, not just with the game of basketball, but the culture of basketball. And the shoes are a major piece of that. Obviously, Michael Jordan gets a lot of credit for how that culture got started. But, I mean, Kyrie Irving is a major piece of that in recent history. I know a lot of NBA players have talked about in the past how that's just a really good shoe to play basketball in. So even if you like the look of it, the design of it, the way that Nike gets the requests and the style points of the players, not just in terms of aesthetics, but in terms of how the shoe actually functions on the basketball floor. I know that's really important to these guys too. And that's definitely going to be important to a player like Ja Morant if he gets that opportunity to have that signature shoe. So for me, Damichael, after reading the story, it was just a further reminder of what Ja Morant is and what he's going to be, not just in Memphis. You know, it's one of those things, and I wrote about this for Grizzly Bear Blues many moons ago, back in Ja's rookie year, when he and Brandon Clark both made the rookie sophomore game, and so did Jaren Jackson Jr. So all those guys went to the All-Star weekend together in Ja's rookie year and Brandon Clark's rookie year. And I wrote an article about enjoy these guys while you can, because they're only going to be Memphis's for so long. They're going to be of the NBA worlds before we know it. And that was especially true of Ja Morant. And that's, you know, this article that you wrote and the focus on Ja, even if it's not a replacement for Kyrie. And again, we're not getting into that. However it shapes out, whether it's both of them together, whether it's Ja just being added to the list, his name is becoming synonymous, not just with the game of basketball, but the culture of basketball. And as you alluded to, contracts are cool. Like, I'm sure Ja Morant enjoys that max contract he just signed. If he can continue that relationship with Nike, that's where the long-term money's at.
The long-term money is, and that's where the longevity is, well beyond your playing years, but just more, of an idea of how big, this potentially could be. You look at Kyrie Irving. I know a lot of people may not pay attention to the shoes that players wear, but if you look, Ja Morant, he wears Kyrie Irving's Nike shoes during games a lot. Going back to this recent game against the New Orleans Pelicans, he was wearing Kyrie ones in that game, Kyrie's first, signature shoe. And then he was wearing Kyrie ones in the season opener against the New York Knicks. Nothing more than, coincidence. He wears a lot of Kyrie's. He wears a lot of Kobe sneakers.
And it's a good basketball shoe, which matters a lot to Ja.
It's a great basketball shoe. It's actually top 2 most worn among the active shoes, right up there with the KDs. The KDs and the Kyries are the most actively worn, shoes amongst NBA players currently playing. So it's a big deal, if, Ja Morant kind of takes the baton from Kyrie Irving in that way. And if you look at it, if you remember Kyrie Irving kind of in 2014 when he kind of, got his first signature shoe, and he took off after that. This was when this was before the Cavaliers make their first finals appearance. And I mean, Nike had already valued him at that point. And after that, you see him in all these fancy Nike commercials where he's doing crossovers, where he's in commercials with people like Questlove and other NBA players. And then, he does the Pepsi commercials with Uncle Drew and, the commercials with Uncle Drew and then the movie with Uncle Drew. Kyrie Irving, at one point, things may have changed for the better or for worse, but at one point he was one of the more likable superstars, in the game because, people loved Uncle Drew and people loved, his style and grace off of the floor as well. And from that perspective is where you think, Ja Morant, a lot of people like him in terms of the relatability, the cultural impact that he has. You mentioned, the kids wearing his jerseys and things like that, and how that can kind of gravitate over to shoes and what it could do for his career.
It's massively important. So don't undersell that stuff. I certainly don't. Shoes aren't really my thing. I like wearing shoes that match the school that I'm working at's colors. That's as fancy as I get with my Nikes. But if Ja Morant gets a signature shoe, you better believe I'm getting some Ja ones in blue, black, and white. I'm going to make sure those come make their way over to Virginia. And we'll talk more about the actual basketball side of it, what Ja Morant and his teammates actually do in their basketball shoes, and why Taylor Jenkins, in his much less formal than in the past coaching attire, which is kind of nice to not see those guys have to be in suits and ties all the time. I'm sure they're enjoying their jobs much more now. But Taylor Jenkins has made a change to how he coaches the team and in-game adjustments. We'll talk about that in our next segment. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. For example, you can learn how to use the voice as an instrument from Mariah Carey. You can learn business strategy from Bob Iger. You can learn cooking from Gordon Ramsay. With over 180 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing that you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. I would highly recommend that you check out Masterclass this holiday. Give one annual membership and get one free. Go to masterclass.com/lockedon today. That's masterclass.com/lockedon. Terms apply. Damichael, in the first segment, we talked a lot about Ja Morant and the impact that he makes culturally to the game of basketball. He obviously impacts the on-the-floor product for the Memphis Grizzlies pretty tremendously. And especially with Desmond Bane out, that impact's only going to be continued to, or it's only going to continue to grow. And I'm interested in your take on this. Again, you went there in New Orleans. You saw it live. You've watched this team every game, as I have, just up close and personal for you more often than me. I'm curious as to your takeaway on something that I know you and I have talked about, others have discussed. Taylor Jenkins, the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, he's made a bit of a shift in terms of his rotation throughout his career as a head coach, at least in Memphis. To this point, he's employed usually 10-man rotations, so 10 players getting playing time on a consistent basis on any given night. This season, that has not been the case. On numerous occasions, including the game against the Pelicans, Jenkins employed a 9-man rotation. That meant guys like Dylan Brooks and John Conchar and Ja Morant all getting 36 or more minutes of playing time. How much of this is an early season tweak? How much of this is an acknowledgement, perhaps, that the team is not very deep right now in terms of injuries and illness and all the things that are going on? Multiple players assigned to the G League, which I know you're going to talk about a little bit. What do we make of this change? Because it is a change. We're not over-exaggerating here. This isn't me yelling and being crazy for the sake of yelling and being crazy. This is a move in a direction that I don't think many of us saw coming, Damichael.
Yeah, see, one thing that we've all kind of lauded the Grizzlies for is their depth, right? We talk about how when this guy goes out, this guy steps in. This guy goes out, this guy steps in. And last season, that was very much true. But right now, the depth is not the exact same. And maybe it's because, you have Desmond Bane hurt right now. Maybe because Zaire Williams is hurt right now. And then, earlier Jaren Jackson Jr., was hurt. So, I will say that we have not seen this team fully healthy, but we're talking about the roster as currently constructed. The depth isn't the same. And you don't have to look too far. Actions speak louder than words. And the actions of the Grizzlies have kind of showed us that more recently. One thing is the Grizzlies using the 9-man rotation. I asked Taylor Jenkins, about, Jake LaRavia not playing in the last game. And he kind of, he's not going to talk down on Jake LaRavia, of course, but he's just basically was saying, hey, look, if he wants to go to a 10-man rotation, Jake LaRavia will get, more minutes. And if he does do that, he will. But right now they're just leaning towards a 9-man rotation because they felt like that is, better for what they're trying to do, which is another example of, hey, the bench isn't getting the results right now. We've seen, you look in the plus minus column a lot of times in these games, the bench is -9, -10, -12.
-17 and 16.
Yeah, and that's what we saw against the Pelicans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of struggles from the bench. I know a lot of people talked about the bench not having a shot creator and things like that. And even the guys like John Conchar who can shoot the ball, not really getting open and shooting, the ball, like Mr. Joe Mullinax here talks about a lot.
That's important.
Brandon Clark, you paid him a lot of money, and he hasn't been producing at the same exact level yet. Now, granted, Jaren Jackson Jr. got back, and he's talked about it twice now, how Jaren Jackson Jr. returns kind of helps him, so we'll see how that plays out over the course while those two are on the floor together. So there is promise on that end. But I mentioned, the 1 point going to the 9-man rotation. Then the other thing is, you touched on it, a lot of guys are in the G League right now. And, there's sending one guy down to the G League. They're sending two guys. But then you have your two-way guys, and, Lofton, Vince Williams. But you also have Xavier Tillman, Kennedy Chandler as well down there. So that's what? Xavier Tillman, Kennedy Chandler, two-way guys. It's 4 players, plus Zaire Williams is out. Danny Green is out as well. And then Desmond Bain's out. That's 7 players on your roster who
you have 10 healthy bodies.
Yeah, you have 10 bodies left. So this upcoming game, which we'll talk more about going forward, is going to be interesting because you're basically going to rely on 10 guys. None of those guys, Xavier Tillman, is not going to be available. So your center rotation pretty much is Steven Adams, Santi Aldama, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark, and rotating those guys between the 4 and the 5. Again, another reason why Taylor Jenkins touched on Jake LaRavia not playing is the wing depth. They have a lot of guys there that they're trying to, play, and I just don't think they want to have 2 rookies on the floor as well.
Well, here's my issue, okay? And I'm going to put on my complainer hat for a second, Damichael. Hold on, I'm going to strap it in. I'm going to complain for a moment. Part of the issue with Desmond Bain being out is who's going to shoot the ball, right? Who's going to shoot the ball and create range for the offense? We know, at least to this point, that John Conchar is not going to do it. Like, maybe he'll come out against the Oklahoma City Thunder and, flip me off 1,000 miles away as he launches 10 threes and makes 5 of them. That'd be fantastic. Hooray, the Grizzlies are probably going to win that game. John Conchar is not shooting at the volume he needs to, at least not yet. Consistently, maybe is the fairest way to put that. David Roddy, whatever gods may be, bless him, he's not someone that you can be comfortable doing that on a consistent basis. Brandon Clark's not. And Tyus Jones is low-key, or maybe not so low-key, off to a pretty poor start in that department himself in terms of scoring the basketball, especially from beyond the arc. So who the heck is going to put the ball in the basket from beyond the arc? You hope that Jaren Jackson Jr. can do it, but he's coming off of injury. And again, even when healthy, that hasn't been his strong suit of late. Same thing with Dylan Brooks. He's not a marksman, so to speak. The one guy, Damichael, that you and I have been beating the drum for, that has a sweet-looking stroke, who can hit those shots, is Jake LaRavia. So whether it's John Conchar, who can shoot the ball, but for whatever reason refuses to, maybe the shots aren't carefully curated well enough, as our buddy Keith Parrish over at Fast Break Breakfast says. Maybe they're not artisan shots. Or whether it's David Roddy, who I think looks more and more like a functional, solid NBA rotation player every time he plays, but he's not that weapon. Why not make LaRavia the guy that you give those opportunities to and say, hey, Rook, go shoot the damn ball?
Yeah, it sounds simple, right?
Yeah, hire me. I could be an assistant coach for you, Taylor Jenkins. I'm right here. My football season's over.
Football season's over. There it is.
I can be a wonderful analyst for you. Clearly.
Yeah. I can see you. I can see you getting the job as the new guy holding the players back on the bench, Joe. I think you do a great job of containing Dylan Brooks.
That might be true,
and
that's probably all I'm qualified for, obviously.
And Steven Adams for running on the floor. I can see you doing it. I can see you doing it. But yeah, great point. At the end of the day, we do believe that Jake LaRavia is one of the better shooters, but it's deeper, I think, too. It's defensive things. The bench is really struggling defensively. I think that's playing a role in it as well. And I just don't think they want to have two rookies on the floor at the same time. There's no doubt about it. If Zaire Williams was healthy right now, who, by the way, I've seen more actively, at practice of late. Nothing, I can't confirm if he's practicing full time with the team or not. But, in the past couple weeks or so, there was a lot of moments where we didn't even see Zaire Williams, participating. So seeing him just out there shooting shots with the teams, I think is a step in the right direction as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, he doesn't trust, I don't think, as many guys right now, which is it's fair. It's early in the season. You got this super young roster. If you're doing this later in the season, then it's a bigger concern. But right now, they're just trying to work out the kinks of who to play, when to play him. And Taylor Jenkins, as he said, it's a game-to-game thing.
Well, they better figure it out, Damichael, because as we're going to talk about in our final segment on this episode, the team that's coming in on Friday night ain't as bad as we thought they were going to be when the season began. It's because of one dude in particular who is, I think the technical term is, hooping right now for the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll talk more about that in our final segment. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league that's out there, from football to esports and everything in between. They've got it all over at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, if you're listening to us, chances are you do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix at betonline.net. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. The Memphis Grizzlies coming up here tonight. Damichael, it's a ball night. It's a hoop night in Hoop City. The Grizzlies are back at it after a couple of days off, which I know you needed the time away for a minute there, Damichael. The team definitely did as well. It's a chance for them to get their first look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, and a team that we all just assumed, the Thunder are tanking again. They stink again. Not so fast, my friend, Lee Corso style. They are playing good basketball right now. Now, the bottom could fall out at any point. I do think that's important to point out. But I don't see it happening anytime soon because, in large part, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the tear that he is currently on playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Have you looked at his stats, SGA stats, Damichael? This dude is averaging 32.3 points per game on almost 55% shooting. It is phenomenal what he's doing offensively. Oh, and by the way, he's posting 5.9 assists per game. This guy's shooting 90% from the charity stripe. He is doing all sorts of amazing things for this Thunder team. I am disappointed that Desmond Bane got hurt, in part or large part because obviously he makes the Grizzlies better. But in a selfish way, my bold prediction was Desmond Bane being an all-star. That looked really smart for the first few weeks of the season. Now with Bane out, SGA kind of looks like he's primed to be that all-star guy. Maybe our boy Bane's going to be left out of the mix. That's how well SGA is playing right now.
Yeah, it's not a lot of spots there in the Western Conference with those guards. I mean, it's fierce competition. But yeah, he is having a tremendous start. I think he's coming off a 42-point game, over 30 points in 5 of his last 6 performances. This is going to be a Dillon Brooks, assignment. Everyone talks about what Dillon Brooks does on offensive end. We'll tell you what, this is Dillon Brooks, another opportunity for him to say, hey, what about what I do on the defensive end? He'll have the main. Now, of course, there's a lot of screens that's going to be set in the Grizzlies. Sometimes they switch things or something like that, but he's going to get the first crack, more than likely, or the second crack. I know sometimes the Grizzlies wait till the second half to start, Dillon Brooks on a guy like that. We'll see how they configure that. But, man, he's tough. He's really a tough matchup. You mentioned just the shooting efficiency at 32 points per game. And, I'll tell you what, this is a guy I've been watching for a long time. I remember when he was at Kentucky, I was a student at UT. I was a student reporter, and I was there in St. Louis when he ripped the heart out of Tennessee Vols fans and beat Tennessee, in the SEC tournament and beat Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield, and those squads. And then I remember, he goes to the Clippers and he's playing, with Lou Williams and Patrick Beverly.
Those were fun, low-key fun teams.
They were really fun because you remember they were playing in the first round against Golden State Warriors with KD and Curry and, the loaded Golden State Warriors.
Right.
And who the Clippers were giving the ball to in crunch time? One of the guys was a young rookie, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm like, why are they giving this young kid the ball? Then he goes over to OKC, and you remember that bubble run that OKC had? And I think they were a 6th seed, and it was Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder, and then it was SGA. This guy has game. He's been had game, but now he's really stepping into the role of like a leader. It's going to be fun to watch, him versus John Morant. Some people say they look alike and all that. And I think we'll see it's a fun matchup there overall. But I don't think the Thunder, the reason we're talking so much about SGA is because the bad part about the Thunder is there isn't much more to offer over there. You do like Chet Holmgren, number 3 pick from this past draft, but he's out for the season. So, that's pretty much what they have to offer. And if he has a big night, they have a chance. If he doesn't, Grizzlies are probably going to come out with this one comfortably.
The future looks very bright in OKC. They own every single one of their own first-round picks moving forward, plus seven, Damichael, other future first-round picks. Obviously, they're not going to make all those selections. You mentioned Chet Holmgren. I will caution you, partner. Make sure you put some respect on Josh Giddey's name, who does a really good job in terms of being a triple-double threat every night. He leads the Thunder in rebounds at 7.2 per game as a guard, a bigger wing, similar to SGA. I also, the Grizzlies should win. I want to stress that. They should win. But being without Bane really impacts their offense. And the Grizzlies are currently a 6.5 point favorite in this game as we record it. Look at their last 5 games, Damichael. They beat the Wizards by 1, which, that's not overly impressive. But, the Wizards have some talent. They lose to Boston in Boston, but only by 4 points. They beat the Knicks by 10 in Madison Square Garden. They beat Toronto by almost 20. I think Siakam's out right now, but still, beating the Raptors by 20 almost, that's nothing to shake a stick at. And then their last game in their last 5, a double overtime loss to arguably the favorite for the NBA Finals as of this moment, the Milwaukee Bucks. If you're going into this game thinking that the Thunder are just going to lay down, you are in for a shock to your system. The Thunder are 10-5 against the spread this year. I know we're not a gambling podcast. I'm just saying 6.5 on the Grizzlies as the favorite. We're locked on Grizzlies, but I might have to bet on the Thunder to cover.
Yeah, if you go over to BetOnline,
Yeah, gotta check out BetOnline.
I'm not sure what the over/under is for this game, but I would lean towards the under. I'm sorry, because in this game you talk about, don't sleep on this guy, and the thing about the Thunder is their defensive activity. It's one of the best in the NBA right now.
Right,
the Thunder are top 5 in the NBA currently in steals and blocks per game. Where have we heard that before? Well, that was the Grizzlies last season. That was what this team in Memphis was last season. And we know how that propelled the Grizzlies offense and how they turned, that transition defense over into, easy scoring opportunities. And that's what the Thunder are doing right now. They have a lot of young, active guys who are getting steals, a lot of athletic guys who can go block the basketball. And they're creating easy scoring opportunities. So that's something that they're really good at doing. And I said, you probably want to take the under because the Grizzlies defense, a lot of people have focused on the 3-pointers allowed the last 2 games. Yes, the Washington Wizards did have a season high in 3-point makes against the Wizards. And yes, the New Orleans Pelicans did have a season high in 3-pointers made against the Grizzlies. But did you peep something else? In that game against the Wizards, they were shooting terribly on 2-pointers. And the Pelicans weren't too much better. The Pelicans scored 113 points, and I think they made like 19 3-pointers. That's not a huge number when you're shooting that hot from 3-point range. The Wizards set a season high in 3-pointers made, still only scored 102 points. All that being said, the defense is trending in the right direction. I know Danny Green, talked about the home and away splits. with the 3-point shooting. And that's been noticeable. The Grizzlies are one of the best 3-point defensive teams at home and one of the worst on the road. They're at home this game. So if you're a fan of those numbers, things appear to be trending in the right direction, just from an overall defensive standpoint. So you look at the Grizzlies defense playing a little bit better right now. And then you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder defense, which has been pretty strong to start the season. Now, they're still two of the highest scoring teams. So, hey, I'll let you make your own decision. I suggested the under, but this is still two of the highest scoring teams, but their defenses have kind of really been big reasons why they're able to score the basketball.
I think that for the Grizzlies offense to match the better production than they've been doing lately, they need Steven Adams on the floor more. And that might sound a little bit of an oxymoron, but Adams only played 13 minutes against the Pelicans, foul trouble and other issues. It sounds like we're going on with Steven there in terms of matchups. I want to see him out there because, again, he helps John Morant immensely in terms of creating space for him on the pick and roll, does all sorts of things really well in terms of screening, rebounding, getting extra offensive possessions. I think Steven Adams is an undersold, unsung hero. If the Grizzlies win this game, I think Steven Adams is going to have a major piece to say about it. Thanks for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. For your second listen today, go check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. On the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies, we got a bonus episode. Damichael Cole is going to do a little bit extra heading into the Brooklyn Nets game, a big-time contest with KD and apparently Kyrie Irving. A big showdown for the Grizzlies heading out to Brooklyn, I believe, this time to take on the Nets. So it'll be an interesting contest for them, and I know you're going to chat it up in an extra episode this coming weekend here, Damichael.
Yeah, and we'll also reflect on the game against the Thunder. So a lot to talk about over the course of the weekend. And, you talked about Taylor Jenkins going game by game with these rotations. Now, probably going to have, 10 guys who are actively available in this game. That's not being talked about enough. These guys down in the G League plus the injuries. It's kind of surprised that Xavier Tillman, is out, because he's on a G League assignment.
Not a great look for him.
And, not a great look at all. But as I think, there are some questions that will arise because, this is a guy who has been around, a while now. Mm-hmm. And we saw him play in Summer League, which wasn't a great look as well. But all things considered, it's a big stretch, not just these next couple games, but this stretch without Desmond Bane. I've talked about treading water and just maybe being a hair over 500 doing what could be a 10-game stretch, possibly getting to 6-4, 5-5, and that being a good thing because I think Desmond Bane is super important, and it's going to be a tough times here. But overall, two very winnable games, two games that I think the Grizzlies will be favored in over the course of the weekend, the Thunder, the Nets. So we'll see how it plays out.
I will be listening to that episode, Damichael, but I will not be joining Damichael because I will be on the beach with my wife, and that's going to be something that I'm going to enjoy, if I'm being totally honest. So I'll be listening. I look forward to hearing that episode, and hopefully you are as well as we get ready going into a weekend here with another couple games for the Grizzlies. Thanks for making Locked On Grizzlies a part of your Memphis Grizzlies fan experience. Or if you're just trying to learn about the Grizzlies, maybe you're a Thunder fan, trying to get more info. You like John Morant. You're trying to tap in to what the Memphis Grizzlies are doing. We thank you for finding us. Hopefully you'll stick with us as we continue to try to provide the best coverage of the Grizzlies that there is. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you get podcasts, YouTube, comment, all those fun things. We welcome all that stuff. We want this to continue to be an interactive and growing podcast experience for everybody that takes us in. So for Damichael Cole, I'm Joe Mullinax. Until next time, stay locked in, Grizzlies folks and fans. This is Locked On Grizzlies.